Move on to pending business. Tonight we have a presentation on the TOD zoning code update. Ms. Monroe?
Thank you. So as your packet indicates, this is a special presentation for the transit-oriented development zoning code update. This process was actually started in 2019 with a grant received by CMAP, which is a Chicago Metropolitan Area Planning Organization and RTA, for assistance with this technical zoning code update. We do have a steering committee that is made up of several individuals, one of them being represented by Trustee Pollock, our chairperson from Planning and Zoning Commission, Jill Mateo, and a couple of other representatives of the community, Jeff Cermak and Jennifer Hennigan. And so they've been working with Savoy Consulting Group and Egret and Ox Planning. They selected consultants for the project on reviewing our code and assessing what type of changes might facilitate pedestrian-friendly areas in town, specifically, and predominantly this code is focused in our business districts, so both a little bit downtown and as well as the stretch along Harlem Avenue. So they've assembled a draft of code changes. Those were included in the board packet for review in case you really would like to review several 100 pages of redlined materials. They are available to you and any member of the public. Luckily, we have a representative from Egret and Ox, our consulting team, to present an overview of these materials today. So I'll let them introduce themselves, but we have a presentation on the screen for you. We've put slides that they'll be using to present in front of you to follow along, and so they'll take any questions about the proposed information. I'll note before Todd starts that the process will be, we're introducing this to the village board this evening and the general public, and then we are getting any feedback from this group before it goes back to the steering committee for their final recommendations, which will then be passed to Planning and Zoning Commission, Preservation Commission, and then it'll return to you in spring of 2022 before any adoption. So that's sort of the process, and they'll repeat that again at the end. So, okay, with that, we'll have Todd. Are you there? And
yes. Can you hear me okay?
I don't know if we can hear you. Let's see.
Yeah. So I have the slides on the screen, and then can you hear my audio? Okay.
Okay, here. Let me step out a second.
Technology is wonderful when it works.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about the technical difficulties. They can hear us and have been there for the meeting.
Okay, can you?
Okay, why don't we move on to the
Okay.
next
ahead.
agenda item, and we'll get this ready. A resolution authorizing an additional 2021 fiscal year-end contribution from the general fund to the Riverside Police Pension Fund in the amount of $164,025. Ms. Johns.
Good evening. During the 2021 budget discussions, staff and the board were very conservative about our revenue projections. This led us to budget the required contribution to police pension versus the recommended contribution to police pension. In 2021, the revenues did come in slightly higher than anticipated, so at this time I am recommending to the board that they give the entire recommended contribution to the police pension fund.
Thank you. Any questions? If none, can I ask for a motion, please?
Motion made.
Motion by Mr. Gallegos. Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Pollack. Any questions? Again? Ms. Haley, please call the roll.
Trustee Pollak.
Aye.
Trustee Marshall. Aye. Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Evans. Aye. Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Are we ready with Todd?
Let's try. Todd, will you please try to?
Hello, this is Todd.
Very good. Please introduce yourself and you're ready to go. Thank you for being here.
Sure. Well, thank you, Assistant Village Manager Monroe, and also the Village Manager Francis. Hopefully you can all see the slides. It's the title slide. It's a blue background, and then next slide is just shows an overview. So hopefully it's appearing fine on your end. But thank you to the Board of Trustees for providing us time to present the draft amendments intended to create a more transit-supportive zoning code for Riverside. Particular appreciation to Trustee Pollack for serving on the project steering committee and providing excellent feedback throughout the process. As Ashley had noted, my name is Todd Vanadilok. I'm principal planner with Egret Knox Planning. I'm serving as a project manager and lead planner on this project. I have been planning in the Chicago region for about 20 years, including over a dozen zoning projects and close to another dozen transit-related projects. My colleague, Hans Savoy of Savoy Consulting Group, is also providing planning support for this project, with a particular focus on the village's sign code. As you can see on the screen this evening, I will be providing a high-level overview of the project, including a general overview of the project, summary of outreach efforts, key zoning issues that guided our initial research and discussions, the draft amendments to the zoning code, again, keeping it at a high level to give you a general sense of the changes or additions to the code, and then next steps. So there were two primary project objectives. The first is to promote walkability and transit-oriented development in the Riverside Central Business District. The village's 2013 CBD plan plays a key role in defining guiding principles for the CBD, as well as a framework plan and strategy recommendations. This plan and other relevant plans and studies have guided the draft zoning code amendments. The second objective is to prepare the Harlem Avenue corridor for rapid transit service, which is known as PACE's Pulse Network. While the metro station is the defining transit facility in the Central Business District, enhanced express bus service along Harlem Avenue is among PACE's near-term priority corridor projects. Overall, we have ensured that the code amendments are supportive of walkability and transit access in the CBD and along Harlem Avenue. This slide highlights the main roles and responsibilities of each party in the project. As a client, village staff has provided community insights and feedback, reviewed all draft documents, and ensured the draft code amendments align with the village's broader policies and expectations. The RTA and CMAP RTA in particular funded this project through their community planning grant program. They have also provided technical assistance for this project. And as the consultants, my colleague Khan and I have reviewed the current zoning code and relevant plans and prepared the zoning code amendment, which is tonight's focus. This is also a good opportunity to recognize the important work of the project steering committee. Thank you again to Trustee Pollack for serving on the committee. Other members are Jill Mateo, Jennifer Hennigan, and Jeff Cermak. As you know, Jill and Jennifer serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Jill is also the chair for the steering committee. Their insights and guidance have been invaluable for this project. This slide shows the project study area as defined by the RTA. There are two primary areas of focus. On the left side, shows the entire village. In the middle square or rectangle is the central business district, and on the right-hand side are the eastern part of the village, that's Harlem Avenue corridor, which stretches from 26th Street to Ogden Avenue. The project timeline shown here indicates that we started the project in July 2020, and we have mostly stayed on schedule. There was a stretch of time from February into the summer of this year where there were transitions with staff, both at the village and with the RTA, which created a little bit of delay, but we are still on schedule. The village and RTA also negotiated a project extension to account for this delay, which enables us to complete this project by May 2022. Our outreach approach for this project has included a virtual public workshop last fall, updates to the village board, such as tonight, and meetings with the steering committee. There's also a project website, which has enabled community members to stay updated on project progress, access zoning resources, and review draft documents. We welcome you to visit the website at riversidezoning.com. Last fall, we conducted a virtual public workshop to collect community input. The workshop was designed in a web-based format and was conducted over 3 weeks from October 12th through November 2nd. This slide presents some key workshop stats from that workshop. There were 45 total comments shared on a web-based map of Riverside. In addition, there were 17 interactions to these comments in the form of upvotes and downvotes, which emphasized issues that resonated with others. Overall, 193 people visited the workshop site. Even if they didn't leave a comment, visitors could also engage with informational materials regarding zoning, transit-oriented development, and preliminary zoning issues to consider. Here are some of the key takeaways relating to the Central Business District from the workshop. Comments primarily related to parking, bike facilities, walkability, signs, building heights, and improvements to safety and physical appearance. This slide shows key takeaways that related particularly to Harlem Avenue. These comments focused on parking, signage, building heights, pedestrian and bike-friendly measures, and ground floor office, among others. In addition to public comments from the virtual workshop, our work was guided by a set of preliminary zoning issues that were outlined in the project RFP and initial discussions with village staff and the steering committee. The list shown here on the screen is not meant to be an exhaustive list by any means. Rather, it provided a strong foundation on which to base our research and discussions. You will notice some overlap from this list with the workshop comments shared earlier. With all of this in mind, the draft zoning code amendments focus on the list here, starting from top, the revised zoning districts, transit supportive standards, building heights and bulk standards, which is a zoning term for things like yards and setbacks and encroachments, permitted and special uses, ground floor uses, parking, and signs. And to respect your time and the rest of the meeting agenda, I will go through the remaining slides at a fairly quick pace, primarily summarizing the main zoning code changes at a high level. Each slide provides one or more examples of proposed red line text changes, which I won't really cover tonight, but still want to point out in case you wish to review later in your board packets. The first set is revised zoning districts. Early on in the project, there was consideration to create a TOD overlay district to apply certain transit supportive zoning standards. However, the steering committee decided to develop a new TOD zoning district instead, which you'll see highlighted in purple. It's the third one on the list. The B1 TOD retail business district is the only new district created. All other existing zoning districts stay the same. On the next slide, you'll actually see how that plays out on the zoning map. The B1 TOD district applies along Harlem Avenue on the eastern side of the village, along with the other B1 sub-districts. In particular, the full zoning map on the left-hand side of the slide shows the new B1 TOD district, shown in purple, which is applied to parcels closest to the Berwyn Metro Station, which is located east of Harlem Avenue. The new B1 TOD district stretches along Harlem Avenue from Addison Road on the north to Lawton Road on the south. As shown in the map excerpt on the right-hand side of the screen, these parcels have a current B1C commercial zoning designation. As we summarize the other zoning code amendments tonight, you will notice how the proposed transit supportive zoning districts in the new B1 TOD district are most applicable at this particular stretch of Harlem Avenue, which is one of the 3 potential sites for Pace's Pulse bus rapid transit route with close proximity to the Berwyn Metro Station. The next set of code updates relate to transit supportive standards. First we had prepared revised purpose statements to emphasize greater walkability and bikeability, enhanced access to transit, and adherence to complete streets principles. One reason to emphasize transit supportive language in the purpose statements is because these are often some of the most read aspects of the zoning code, since they encapsulate local vision and expectations for each zoning district or zoning topic. We also added language regarding the protection of a safe and an accessible environment for pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as access to transit. This is similar in nature to the previous slide, but the transit supportive language extends beyond the purpose statements and into the actual zoning standards and requirements. Next focus is building heights, building standard, bulk standard, and encroachments. First is building heights. Here we added minimum building heights and increased maximum building heights to provide for a more adaptable height range. The first table on the left lists newly proposed minimum height standards, which is 24 feet for all zoning districts except the R1 and R2 districts. The second table on the right compares existing and proposed maximum height standards. Again, R1 and R2 stay the same, while all other districts are proposed to allow for 1 additional story or a 4th story. Special uses and planned unit developments can allow for a 5th story in certain districts. This slide is also a good point to highlight the influence of the steering committee. We initially suggested a minimum height, building height of 2 stories. However, steering committee member Jeff Cermak indicated developers would rather have height based in feet because they can find tenants for a 24-foot single-story structure, but may have a hard time filling a 2-story structure, particularly the upper story. So this really shows the value that the steering committee provided to the project. Next, we clarified how bulk requirements for schools, religious institutions, and places of assembly may necessitate a greater level of review. Village officials would have a greater level of review of substantial site features like parking lots, sports fields, lighting, internal access roads, etc. We also clarified permitted encroachments in front, side, and rear yards. Encroachments were one of the key issues identified at the start of the project. Again, there are too many instances to review each particular amendment, but here is a list of accessory structures that were acceptable. We also provided a provision that a maximum front yard business districts may provide up to an additional 5 feet for restaurants that offer outdoor dining. This additional 5 feet for outdoor dining must ensure adequate walking space for pedestrians and not impede safety. The next set is permitted and special uses. Here we added language to emphasize employment generating uses, which are critical to transit supported development. The overall idea is to give proper focus on employment, which is often viewed as the driver for daytime population that stores, restaurants, and services often need to thrive. We also updated district use tables by adding new uses and removing others. Added uses generally included emerging uses that were not around when the zoning code was originally created. Things like live workspaces, co-working spaces, and so on. But we also removed other uses in certain districts like community residences, funeral homes, gas stations and schools, not in all districts, but in certain ones that in our research felt like they didn't make sense in certain districts. The next slide is related to ground floor uses. Here we propose, this is where we actually propose a whole new subsection in your zoning code to aid in the limitation of office uses on the ground floor. This is possibly the proposed change that may raise the most questions or concerns, but however, there was actually a unanimous support from the steering committee when we presented this to them last month. So that was good to see. This new subsection was driven by the concern that office uses could overwhelm ground floor spaces. Foot traffic is often viewed as a key factor in enlivening a business district that enables pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit riders to safely and conveniently access businesses and services at the ground floor of buildings. On one hand, restaurants and stores are generally viewed as active ground floor uses due to the foot traffic they generate from pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit riders passing by on the sidewalk or on the street. On the other hand, inactive uses, like certain offices and residential uses, do not generate as much foot traffic in comparison to retail uses. To minimize inactive ground floor uses in business districts, we propose the following steps to help meet this end. You'll actually see them highlighted in red, listed A through E. So I'll just quickly go through them. A was allow dwelling units above the ground floor as a permitted use. B was allowing dwellings at the ground floor as a special use. C was allow offices at the ground floor of a single-story building as a permitted use. D was allow offices at the ground floor of a multi-story building as a special use. And E is allow professional offices, or just allow offices. We're actually going to remove professional. That was something I forgot to take out, but it'll just be offices. So E is allow offices above the ground floor as a permitted use. Special use permits provide village officials with greater latitude in assessing how proposed uses will impact street life and encourage inactive ground floor uses, like certain offices, to locate above the ground floor where possible. This approach seems less restrictive than imposing a strict maximum percent cap on ground floor offices. For example, a lot of towns say 50% maximum offices at the ground floor. But why not use a maximum percent cap? Oftentimes, a cap like this can inhibit unique office spaces, such as co-working and live workspaces at ground floor and activate street life. So giving village officials that greater latitude through the special use permitting process made sense, and it seemed when we discussed this with the steering committee that they agreed as well. The next set of zoning code amendments deals with parking. Here we reduce parking requirements within walkable proximity to transit facilities. In certain cases, parking requirements within proximity of a transit facility, typically a half-mile walk to a train station, and a quarter-mile walk to a bus stop, may be reduced as the transit-served area is accessed increasingly more by pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit riders, and less so by motorists. As a result, parking reductions are proposed that account for transit-oriented uses within the B2 district and B1 TOD district, as well as above the ground floor of a mixed-use development in the B1C and B1TC districts. In most cases, the number of parking spaces is reduced by 50%. So you can see here on the screen, your existing code, for example, multiple family dwelling, currently says 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. A 50% reduction would, in a TOD area, would be 1 space per dwelling unit, or 1 parking space per dwelling unit. Parking reduction may also apply to other residential uses in the B1TC district, given the district's proximity to bus transit facilities along Harlem Avenue and the nearby Berwyn Metro Station. Non-residential uses may also apply a maximum 20% parking reduction to their parking requirements in transit-oriented areas, including the B2 districts and the new B1 TOD district. We also propose new standards for loading zones. This was among the key zoning issues shared earlier in the project. These new standards should provide greater guidance and clear up gray areas when dealing with loading zones in business districts. We also added language regarding bicycle parking. Parking requirements in zoning codes typically focus primarily on cars, but we wanted to bring greater focus to bicycle parking. We utilized the City of Evanston zoning code as a model for how to handle the integration of bicycle parking standards in Riverside zoning code. The excerpts on this slide highlight straightforward integration of bike parking into zoning code language for Riverside. Next is signs. The first one here is that we updated the sign code to ensure compliance with the Reed versus Town of Gilbert Supreme Court decision on content-based restrictions on signs. Since we were updating the zoning code, it was a good time to ensure Riverside's sign code complies with the findings of this landmark Supreme Court case. As you can see on the bottom left corner in the little sidebar, the general rule of thumb is for sign regulation to be considered content neutral, you should not have to read the sign to determine what type of sign it is and how to regulate the sign. Essentially, the sign code can regulate the physical aspects of a sign, such as height, signage area, lighting, etc., but not what it says. Relating to this, we revised language to remove regulations based on specific content and ensure your signs are content neutral to comply with the Supreme Court decision. We also clarified, consolidated, and added definitions of common signage terms, including the suggestion to add graphics to illustrate certain signage concepts. And here you can see a list of definitions that we added or modified in your zoning code. Related to zoning graphics, one other thing that we did was clarified methods to measure sign height. This is an example to show that how we updated the certain zoning code and sign code graphics. Some graphics need to be updated to align with revised standards. For example, the three you see on the screen, these actually relate to modified sign standards for how to measure sign height. But there are other graphics that we just want to modernize just to appear less grainy or washed out in your zoning code because of the age of your zoning code. And the last one relating to signs is we just updated other aspects of the sign code. We updated projecting sign standards in the B1 district. We added projecting signs to the list of allowable signs in the B2 district right away. We also updated lighting standards for canopy signs, limited height of wall signs on multi-story buildings, and then recommended the elimination of pole signs in certain areas. And then there was just a kind of a scattering of other code elements that we amended as well, and I'll go through those relatively quickly. Here we added language regarding rear facades, buffer yards, and building heights, particularly facing the railroad. We clarified standards for temporary uses, provided additional bulk requirements for temporary structures, expanded fence standards to cover business districts. Your current code only covers fence standards for residential districts, so we thought it made sense to extend those to the business districts as well. And the last one is we provided more detailed lighting standards too. So the last slide is just to go over the next steps in the process. Here you can see that we're looking to spend the early part of 2022 to finalize the zoning code amendments, to share those with village staff and the RTA, and also with the steering committee. That gets us through March 2022. And then we'll go through the final review and adoption process starting in March and concluding the project in May 2022. So thank you for your time. I'm definitely open to any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you, Todd. We appreciate that update. Any questions for Todd while we have him on the phone?
Yeah, just a question. That was, first of all, very helpful and provided context to this over 100 pages of red line, so I truly appreciated it. If we were looking to dive deeper into the transit-oriented changes, and I believe it was the Harlem Avenue Business District that include those, would that just be Chapter 5 in the business districts that we drill down on, or is there other parts that we would need to focus on?
It would mostly be that section, but there are references to the district kind of scattered throughout. So, but if you really want to pinpoint the actual section to look at, yeah, that would be the right section. But yeah, it'll be mentioned throughout, though.
Anything else? Doug, do you have anything you'd like to add? Since you're on
Well,
the-
I would just add that, This is an ongoing process. The committee has thrown out these ideas for consideration, some of which I have some concerns about, but I think they're worth discussing and worth hearing from our Planning and Zoning Commission and eventually the village board. None of these are determined necessarily. It's just a process that we want to continue to go through. And I would also echo Ashley and Todd. The committee did some really good work, I think, and I appreciate the volunteers, the residents that served on that committee. Jill Mateo, Jennifer Hennigan, Jeff Cermak, and I leave anybody out? And me. We had some good discussions, and I look forward to seeing this process continue.
Good, thank you. As trustees delve through this, if you have anything you want to add or questions, please feel free to email Ms. Monroe, and she could add them to the list.
I will. I'll just note that this presentation will clip and add to the committee's webpage on our village website, along with the presentation that was made this evening. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for your time.